When your boss is being a complete jerk, sometimes you have to maliciously comply. We'll get to that in a bit, but first, let me get your change. I work at a gas station in Oregon, with half the pumps being self-serve and half being mini-service, which means that we're there to pump your gas for you but not obligated to do anything else, like wash your windshield. But we do when we're asked, to be nice. There's this lady that comes in almost every day and gets like $5 or $10 worth of gas, asks us to wash her windshield, and never tips. She's really weird about it, like it's her little power trip. Last time she was in, it was raining, and she still smugly asked me to wash her windshield. And being hardcore customer service guy, I did. But then I thought twice about it after the fact. I go that length for nice folks, but she's not nice. She's benchy and whiny and weird. So windshield lady comes in today and hands me $9 for gas, and then as usual asks me to wash her windshield with a smug look on her face. I said I would, but then by the time I got back out, there were a good 8 cars on the pumps. I told her, I'm sorry, I can't do your windshield right now. It's too busy. Well, she gets really snotty with me and has me stop the pump, which means that since she paid cash, she needs her change. Okay, you'll get your change. I went inside and told my coworker I need the change on pump 2, but make sure to vend extra pennies from the safe and put 50 of them in there, loose. He looked at me like I was crazy, but then I explained who it was for, and so he gladly handed me over the change. By the way, we have to wait in line inside the attached convenience store with other customers to get change for gas, because our pump guy often doesn't have their own till open for a shift. So as I was standing in line to get windshield lady's change, she came inside and was death glaring our other customers, and then must have seen me waiting and went back out to her car. She was already getting snotty with me the moment I walked back out to her car. So put the $3 bills in her hand and then an absolute cascading assload of pennies and a few nickels on them. Sorry, we're short on silver, I said. The look on her face. That was the most satisfying use of pennies ever. She sounded like Mr. Lumbergh Milton from Office Space. She was still stammering when she was driving away, and I didn't listen to or identify a single word she said, hoping this will discourage her from coming back. But if it doesn't, then we will once again have a shortage of silver change. Because, alas, that is the economy we're in. Times are tough. So anyone that's worked a till or customer service that involves like the handling of cash, I'm sure can totally relate to this story. You save your change, your pennies and nickels and whatnot to give to change for like rude customers or like smug, annoying people like this lady. So it's extremely petty, but I think it's hilarious. And as someone that's had to deal with people like this before and give them change, I totally co-sign. RC Test Subject 10 commented, I had a similar situation, but it was after 4th of July, and people's had ticked into the self-serve window washer container. Someone was super rude, asked I do it for them, and didn't have time to wait for me to change the container, so I did as they asked. Also, hi, my name is Brendan, and if you guys enjoy these malicious compliance videos, it would be awesome if you left a like or left a review if you're listening to our podcast. That said, our next story is, if we want your input, we will ask for it. Period. A few months ago, a new business investor at work came on board as a manager, and he's been an absolute hard butt. He's cracking down on anything he considers to be a waste of time, and he's unforgiving. After a week of watching us work, he and the other managers held a company-wide meeting to iron out some wrinkles in the company that he observed since he started. It wasn't an open dialogue, though. In fact, that's one of the things he wanted to wrinkle out. It was essentially just 20 minutes of, it's our way or the highway, deal with it. The line, if we want your input, we'll ask for it, period, really stuck with me though. And it was made abundantly clear afterwards that it was directed at me. The company has had a big problem with employee turnover, and I was in the position to know why, since I interact with everyone through my role. Essentially, people are quitting because the work they were doing wasn't what they signed up to do. The phrase, if I knew this is what I'd be doing, I wouldn't have accepted the job, was a common sentiment. They accepted the job under the impression that they would be serving customers, answering emails and phone calls, general customer service stuff. But instead, they spend about 90% of their time in a hot warehouse packing online orders over and over again. I shared that with management. I let them know what the people leaving were saying, in case they wanted to take that into account moving forward. They just thanked me and I left, but the new manager hated that so much that he decided to make a meeting about giving them unsolicited advice. They spoke with me privately afterwards and referred back to when I told them about what the quitting employee said. And they told me that the way they interpreted that was I was implying that they were being deceitful when hiring people. I told them, no, I don't think that at all. I was just relaying what those people were saying about how they felt. They didn't care. They doubled down and said again, if we want your input, we will ask for it. Period. That's how I knew it was directed at me. I asked them for clarification, like what constitutes advice or input, and the new boss said, unless you're asking us a question about the work you're supposed to be doing, we don't want to hear it. We don't want your opinion on how you think we should handle situations. We don't want your ideas on how you think the business can be better run. And we don't want gossip about what other people are saying about us. Just focus on your job. Fine then, I'll roll with that, no problem. I've worked for them for years and they always appreciated my ideas, opinions, and input until that point, but hey, if they don't want my input anymore, that's their choice and I'll respect that. I knew it was just the new boss saying that stuff since this sort of attitude with them only started when he did, but the others either agreed with him or were too intimidated to disagree. Either way, whatever, I'll comply with their request. Since then, the problem hasn't been fixed. We've had 2 more people come and go, both of them because they didn't sign up for this. Shocker! A third one started about 5 weeks ago, and he has taken his frustration in a different direction. I've overheard him complaining over and over again to other people about how he didn't sign on to stand around in a hot warehouse for hours packing online orders, but instead of quitting like everyone else, he just got angrier and angrier. And then he hulked out. I was upstairs at my desk when I started to hear smashing. I went down to the warehouse to see what was going on, and this guy was taking customers' packages and smashing them out of frustration. A few others in the warehouse gathered and just watched in amusement. It was like something out of a cartoon. The new boss heard the commotion and came down. Long story short, the guy was fired and I was asked if I knew why he flipped out. I said, I don't know what happened exactly to cause him to flip out, but I know that for weeks he's been complaining about not signing up to work in a hot warehouse for hours. Maybe he just reached a tipping point about it. Not sure. And he said, well, why didn't you tell us? So, of course, I said, because last time I told you that employees were complaining about that, you accused me of implying that you were being deceitful when hiring them. Then you told me to stop gossiping. He had to eat crow a bit on that, which was just so freaking delicious to witness. But I was also reprimanded for taking the request too literally, and he accused me of being petty. Whatever though, I don't care, because I had to adjust the stock levels for the goods that had to be replaced, and they lost about $10,000 in the rampage. Some of the items that were smashed worth $2,000 each. Learning that made the whole thing worthwhile. Perhaps enjoying that does make me petty. OP, you are totally justified here, not petty. Piss on your employees for trying to micromanage and go on this power trip to basically put you in your place. You did what they asked, and if it wasn't meant to be taken literally, then don't make the frickin' comment. Your employer sucks, and I'm glad that they lost $10,000. Yippee. Scorpio ZA commented, the fact that so many people have used that phrase means the company is actually being deceitful in its hiring practices. OP responded saying, it's certainly misleading. I went through the exact same thing when I started, except I didn't complain or quit, but I do remember thinking that's not what they described in the interview. They made it seem like it will be a little bit of everything. They mentioned there'd be some picking and packing, but they certainly made it seem like that wouldn't be the main thing. My theory is they know that people don't like to pick and pack online orders in a hot warehouse, so they omit the fact that that is the majority of the work in order to trick them into accepting the job. But it's a bad plan if true, because people would quickly figure it out. Our next story is dress code. This didn't happen directly to me, but a person I used to work with a couple of years back. We worked as system consultants and would travel to the sites we were assisting during the phases of the projects that required being there in person. As travel costs for these trips would directly impact the budget of the project or were passed on to the client, we were encouraged to travel as lightly and plan as much ahead as possible, choosing the lowest fare within reason and not go overboard with the hotel and meals. Most of the time, this worked well enough. If something was out of the ordinary, usually a quick call to whomever to explain the reason behind it would clear things up. Our expenses would be approved and we'd carry on, until the company was hired by this one customer. People there seem to operate out of some parallel world where the constraints of the real world would not apply. Anyway, the usual policy of being cost-conscious also applied there, and the controller from the customer made a point to let us know that they would not approve expenses our company or my colleague, who was a directly hired contractor, submitted if we weren't mindful of costs. It inevitably happened that we flew in for our first in-person meeting, and booking the lowest available fare within a reasonable schedule meant we flew without checked luggage and showed up in button-down shirts, dark chinos, and black slip-on shoes. Not the most formal attire, but certainly not in pajamas, and perfectly acceptable for every other client up to then. Well, not for these people. We were taken aside and told that their C-suite management was very taken aback that their provider couldn't even manage to show up in suits, proper shoes, and an iron shirt. I was stumped, but my contractor colleague retained his cool and simply asked for a quick 2-sentence email with the requirement for suits, iron shirts, and formal shoes. The client surprisingly obliged. Cue our next trip, and when coordinating with my colleague to book similar flight times in the same hotel, things got interesting. First, we were flying in the evening before. Second, we were checking luggage. Third, the No Frills Hotel a little further out of town, but close enough to the client's office wouldn't do this time. Since they wanted formal attire without any creases, we'd have to check in trolley, because 2 suits and a fresh shirt for each day plus a spare weren't going to fit in our carry-on. And since we'd have to iron any creases out, we have to book a hotel that has ironing facilities. So the business hotel downtown, it has to be this time. And the time spent ironing will be invoiced, or at least my contractor colleague will. I'll skip over the uneventful meeting and go straight to when my company's invoice and the contractor's expenses claim got rejected. Since we had the email requesting formal wear, we argued that this was done at the client's request. The controller wouldn't budge, so the contractor immediately stopped working for the client and told my management as much, recommending I do the same. After missing a deadline and a couple of remote meetings, all with a short but sweet answer that there is an outstanding payment, the controller relented. The C-suite dropped the dress code, and we dropped the client the moment the contract was done. I've since been contacted by them again through LinkedIn in an attempt to recruit me. So not a whole lot to discuss here, but once again, this is a case of taking instructions, which you now have in writing through an email, taking them literally, and then using them against your employer or the powers that be. So love the pettiness, shove it right back in their faces, and, kind of catch them in this contradiction. Good job. Marvelo_tomato commented, when will management realize that when they're asked to put something in an email, that this means a red flag for them? Our next story is the cable live? Then let me finish it myself. This one is from my early days when I was working as a technician for an internet provider company, but it still brings a smile to my face when I remember it. And recently had a technician coming to install my internet, and it all came back. I was working mostly residential buildings, and my job at the time was pretty simple. Come to the basement, find our distribution box, patch the cable to the right endpoint for the requesting flat, go to the flat, fix cable outlet when needed, verify cable is live, there's signal coming through, and it is the right signal. This is somewhat important. Connect modem, verify all good, tell the happy customer the internet is ready to use, and off I go. One day I'm doing my job again, but got this know-it-all guy. Had to call him to let me in the building, and it was a blast right from the start. First, he told me he knew exactly where my company distribution box is, only to lead me to the electricity provider box. Then, he's absolutely sure his flat is number XX, while the papers state YY, and indeed was YY. There were a few more helps from his side, which I skipped to avoid this becoming a book. But eventually, we're up in the flat, and I'm going to check the signal, but the guy's like, come on, hurry up. Need my connection. Need to work on super important stuff. I tell him I need to test the signal first, but here he opens up my MaliciousCompliance window. He says, you do not need to do that. Just connect the cable. If the cable's live, just go and I'll finish it myself. I still give him a chance by explicitly stressing that test will take some minutes only, but if it does not work, I will not be able to come earlier than in a couple of days. No, absolutely not. He can finish it by himself. Okay, man, you got it. Already too long story. To make it short, cable is live, but the signal was from local TV antennae. not from our cable internet. This was actually a relatively common issue at that time. Older residential buildings, reused wiring, cable patching to a wrong one, and was not so hard to fix once you knew what's wrong. I can only imagine what the guy tried to make it work before calling our call center to schedule my visit again. What I know is I came to the flat 3 days later, only to be greeted by his lovely wife, which made some tea and thanked me for being kind and fixing the problem. To come to a closure, when a technician came to install my internet a few days ago, I made him some tea and told him to take his time and do all that's needed. We had that little chat, and guess what? The process and issues are still the same, and recently he was telling his junior colleague why checking if cable is live is not enough. Yeah, gotta love when the customer thinks that they know more than the employee. And sometimes, I'll be honest, this is the case. If it's a former line of work of the customer or even a current one, they may actually know more than what the employee is attempting to do, but that's not the point. Let the employee do their job. If you want to do it yourself, then don't hire anybody and do it yourself. So it's definitely satisfying to see the homeowner here eating a little bit of crow. ZZAPal commented, I had a similar situation, but from the other side. Telecom technician was trying to blame me for not working internet because I used Linux box and it's definitely misconfigured. They were going through some hoops to blame it on me until I finally asked them to connect their laptop and prove me that it still works. Suffice to say, it took them a couple hours of fighting with their machine until they stepped down, changed the tone, and finally called the guys on the other side to flip the switch in some rack. And only then it started working. To add more to that insult, they connected the cable to the Linux box that's clearly misconfigured, just to see it work right away without me even having an opportunity to touch the keyboard. Something they could do right away if only they listened to me in the first place. That would save them the trip and lots of hours spent in moldy basement. No one 2021 responded saying, last time my provider's modem's router did not connect, I disconnected all other equipment, NanoPi, Raspberry Pi, and other Linux computers, and put modem to default config before I called them just to save time. Otherwise, I knew they would blame it on my equipment. They're a small local internet provider. Their modem is old and does not provide DHCP reservations. Therefore, I've installed redundant DHCP Linux boxes. They also do not provide IPv6, so I installed an IPv6 tunnel, Pi-hole, etc. Explaining all that stuff to the technician coming is a waste of time. Immediately, as he would see disabled DHCP on the modem, he would lose focus and look for an error where there's not any. In the end, he changed the modem and explained he will use mine as a spare, as they sometimes just don't connect, and in the next building it will. Our next story is Exempt employee, sick with COVID and emailed my boss that I can't come in. I asked if I can work from home, but he said no and I should take the day off. The next day I asked again, just so I won't use up my sick days. He finally said yes and that I should only work half day and use 4 hours in sick leave. Not too happy, but I do what I was told, and then got an email from HR. Exempt employees get full day of pay as long as they work at least 50% of the day. Since then, I've been leaving work early when I finish my work for the day. It's been pretty much 5 to 6 hour days for me. Technically, my boss is from another department and we seldom have to cross paths. That is a heck of a policy. Of course, you can't hold it against someone for having COVID, right? So forcing them to drain their sick time and not paying them, having to do furlough time or whatever, really shouldn't be an option. But this is definitely a nice little workaround, so good on the boss for coming up with that one. I'm Not Your Boyfriend commented, kudos to your boss, looking out for your health and asking you to rest instead of working while sick. Also, finding out a way to make you work less while you're recovering and preserving your sick leaves and still letting you get full pay. Best Boss Award. IOI 65536 responded saying, with the profile badge for the achievement of top 5% commenter, I'm with you. This is my general mindset on malicious compliance. Somebody put boss in charge. Boss is deciding actions you should take. I assume that boss understands the impact and consequence of his decision and desires that outcome. If I've warned boss of a negative outcome and he doesn't think I'm right, then I assume his understanding must be better than mine because company has let him make the call. Somehow what I predicted almost always is what happens, but it must just be because I'm really lucky in my guesses since I'm just a peon. Our next story is Contractors keep calling my phone because someone else gave them my number. So for the past year, I've been getting calls from contractors asking if I want any work done on my property. They start off by calling me by name, which is not mine, and then asking if I live at a certain address, which also isn't mine. I tell them I'm not that person, please stop calling my phone. I told them I don't own any property, please stop calling my phone. I asked them to put me on the do not call list. Sometimes they just hang up. Sometimes they just get rude and say things like, why would we stop calling? You gave us your number. For a long time, I would just hang up before saying anything because when the call connects, it makes this beeping sound when I pick up, so I know it's them before they even say anything. Well, after over a year of this, I decided to say, yep, that's me, when they ask me if I'm that person. When they ask me if I still stay at the address, I say, yep, that's my house. When they ask me if I want any solar, landscaping, painting, or driveway work, etc. done, I say, yeah, I sure do. Then they tell me they will have someone come out to my property. What's a good time for me? I tell them a time when traffic is worse, like late afternoon. Then they call me when they get there and tell me they've been waiting for 10 minutes, and I tell them I had to go to the store real quick and I'll be back in 10 minutes. It's very satisfying. So I'm gonna have to raise my hand on this one. Guilty of doing this as well. Usually not the first time like a scammer or a telemarketer calls me, but if it's a repeat offender and I've asked them to stop, I'll go along with their game, I'll play along with them, and I'll either feed them just some BS information, or I'll just, as I'm talking and conversing, I'll hang up the phone mid-sentence to make it seem like the call dropped, and then I'll block the number. And it's petty, but it's like, man, if you're not going to leave me alone, I'm going to have a little bit of fun with this. Nunov_Diabov commented, someone put my son's name, he hasn't lived here for 10 years, on Angie's List, asking for HVAC quotes. I got dozens of contractors calling repeatedly looking for work. I eventually started sending them for a roofing job at a nearby address where I used to work. I told them I had a budget of $2,000. It's a building that housed up to 8,000 people, a few 100,000 square foot roof. They finally got the hint. Parking_low248 responded saying, fun fact, Angie's List sucks for contractors too. Freak those guys. Edit. Wanted to come back and add some context. Angie's List makes homeowners sign into the website just to view the services available. Angie's, or whatever it's called now, they've changed names or merged with others, takes that basic sign-in info and treats it as a lead, and then calls up contractors to share the contact info for these interested customers. If you, the contractor, do not pick up the phone fast enough to pick up the lead, then you are charged. If you do pick up the phone and get the lead and call them up, best case, there's someone who's vaguely interested in your services, but more often, they're just ticked that you're calling them and want to know how the heck you got their information. Angie's is also really rude and aggressive towards contractors who try to cancel or call them out on their absolute bullcrap. I work for my in-laws, but before I worked here, I spent a lot of time in their home, which was also the office. We'd hear Angie's come over the caller ID, and my in-laws would just say, ugh, they're calling again? We told them no. They would call Saturdays, evenings, whatever. Sometimes we would use another number that wouldn't ring up as Angie's, and a really aggressive, angry-sounding man will ask for whoever's name is on the account and do everything he can to avoid telling you he's from Angie's because he knows dang well you don't want to talk to him. One time, I heard my father-in-law get in a shouting match with the guy. Father-in-law is no slouch, and he's a heck of a guy to argue with. He and I used to bump heads all the time, and it ended with the guy saying we were banned from using their service ever again, to which father-in-law replied, good, thank you, finally. They called us again about 2 months later, trying to offer their services as if they'd never heard of us. Possibly they'd gone through a merger and didn't have their records in order. We laughed and said, oh no, you said we were banned. Our next story is, this isn't a biggie, but my life fuel is pettiness. So I've got this GM and we're buddies, but he's a touch cowardly and can't really deal with customers. So I usually do the dirty work for him with recovery tables of guests that had issues. It saves him time to do work in the office, but sometimes he leans heavily on me, and when I should be sent home to save on labor, he'll keep my butt just in case. I'm not complaining, more hours, more tables, more money. But I had this super painful ingrown hair, or so I thought, on my upper back shoulder, and my GM, bless his heart, sees this half golf ball sized bump and goes off on how it could be dangerous and I should go see a doctor ASAP. No go to emergency and waxes nostalgic about a friend that died of MRSA. So I'm like, good call, boss. I'll head over right away. We don't have enough reservations. You'll be fine. Watching him realize he cornered himself was hilarious. Anyway, I'm back from the ER on medication and they lanced and drained it. Turns out it was a pretty solid infection. I'm stoned at home and he's closing the restaurant. Baptism by fire, baby. Except instead of throwing the new guy into the fire, you're kind of throwing the boss into the fire and making him learn how to do the job that he's telling other people how to do. So, sounds like a nice guy, but yeah, he needs this. It's good for him. Healthy. Apple Blossom 1962 commented, I wish I had a boss like that. One time I called my boss and told him I wasn't feeling well. I had a temperature of 104 degrees. I was working at a home and garden show and called him and asked that when he got there, if he could please take over for me so I could go home. I saw him come in, but he never relieved me. 2 days later, I landed in the hospital with gangrene. I almost died. Be grateful you have a boss that cares about you so much. With that being said, that's all the time we have for today. If you enjoyed today's video, drop a like and comment below. And if you want to check out our other videos, click the video on the right. With that being said, I'll see you all next time.